Go down, scroll down one to the next tweet. You guys are gonna laugh. Again, I'll explain to the listeners. So this is so for the listeners, this is how they test the stress test the Mechazilla arms to see if they can hold the booster. These balls, I mean, what are we looking at? What are these bags?
They look like balls, let's be honest.
Yeah, there's like giant balls, and I mean, people are just joking. It's like, yo, these bags are like... And then this video shows what these bags are. They're filling these bags with 100 tons of water.
Oh my God.
Now, can you go down one more?
What is the purpose of those?
Stress testing the arms to do the chopstick catch.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Now here and full screen this. We don't need sound. So I'm going to describe this for the listeners. This video is of the hooks, and you can see the hooks and the fins. This is released by SpaceX. When you watch this video, you see how little room for error there is, and how this booster is caught. Dude, how insane is this?
That is wild. Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. You got Trung Fan, Bilal Zaidi here. Trung, we got lots to talk about. SpaceX has been doing some magic with these chopsticks. We're going to explain what the hell is going on with that, why it's important for humanity, and why there's such a cognitive dissonance with the Elon subject as it relates to that. We're going to talk about Tesla versus Waymo. Nvidia hitting an all-time high, but it is actually down today. We're recording on Tuesday. I think it's 300 billion off Apple to be the second biggest company in the world.
Number one. So 3.2 versus 3.5. I mean, these numbers are so silly.
Fine. They're both doing fine. Right. Yeah. So we'll talk about Nvidia all-time high. Also, S&P 500 hit all-time high. So hopefully everyone's retirement accounts and all the boring stuff you've got invested is doing very well as well. And then we're going to, so there's a lot to cook on. We also want to talk about Jack, because a lot of people have been asking again and again, and we're just going to read out what Jack wrote in the Telegram. Obviously, things, he hasn't been able to join last few months consistently. He's doing okay. Someone asked in the Telegram, is Jack okay? YouTube comments asking the same, and Jack responded in the Telegram. He said, yo, thanks for your concern. We just had our third baby, so getting a 2-hour window is really difficult at the moment. We obviously
That's straight from the horse's mouth. Like we could have paraphrased for you guys, but we asked Jack, give you thumbs up. It's like, the private times, family stuff.
Exactly.
Nothing but respect is like, but that's straight from the horse's mouth right there.
And also, I will say, as Jack made a joke about in our private group chat, he did say NI has unlimited paternity leave or whatever it is. So obviously, obviously, true. Congrats to those guys. We're really happy for you guys, but just so you guys can stop asking, he's doing great. He needs his time right now.
Just based on having one kid, I'm just going to assume that having 3 is a lot more cognitively and time difficult. So that's my perspective. So shout out to the Butcher family, obviously.
Yeah,
incredible.
There we go. So Trung, SpaceX, I think we should just show people the video, right?
Yeah, just show it, man. And honestly, at this point, if you haven't seen it, we're doing you a favor, hop on Spotify or hop on YouTube. So show them the
also, I will say a lot of people did, we made a joke about our 3 listeners on Spotify or wherever. No, like lots of people messaged me and have said, thanks for adding on Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify and you haven't tried it yet, there's video showing. And a lot of people like that, especially for Meme of the Week. So let's get our share screen going here. All right, so Trung, do you want to walk through this video?
All right. So just pause it for a second before you play it. Don't play it yet. So here's the broad outline, and this is just me watching a lot of YouTube videos about the space industry. Well, first of all, what's the best space channel, Bilal? You know the name of it. Best YouTube space channel. Everyday Astronaut. Come on, bro.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
That guy's the GOAT, man. No, you guys got to watch his.
We got different algorithms, man. Yeah. No, but I've been watching a lot of space stuff in the last week because this stuff is absolutely insane.
It's unbelievable. Well, so just a quick TLDR is a Starship is the biggest launch vehicle / space vessel that SpaceX has ever created, and also at this point in the history of mankind.
Insane.
This is bigger than the Saturn V, which is what launched the moon missions in the late 60s and the early 70s. And we'll get more into that.
We're going to talk about that history today,
But just
it's pretty wild when I was digging into this. I didn't realize how wild it is.
The thing about these videos is like, you know how we've talked about in the past on NIAs, like everything is intermediated through our phone. So like you might see the craziest shit in the world, and then the next one's a dumb meme from me, right? Like the guy holding the girl's hand.
Both in the same post half the time.
That might even the same post, right? And I actually knew somebody in Texas that wasn't watching this, but they're 50 miles away. They could feel the earth shaking. And I know some people that went to the launch event too.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, dude, this is insane, right? We're watching on our phones. This thing that they caught just to boost, no, the entire Starship is 398 feet tall and it weighs 11 million pounds, 5,000 tons, right? So it's basically, the best way I've heard anybody describe it is like SpaceX shot a skyscraper into space, a metal skyscraper, and then caught it on a launch pad. Their launch tower is 480 feet tall. So these are like 40 to 50 story buildings, just to give you an idea of what's going on.
Let me show the video then, because then we'll come back and speak about it. But here is...
They catch the booster in the launch tower. It's insane. Go ahead.
Can you hear it as well with the cheering?
It's amazing.
Insane. Wow. Did you see the memes about guys crying to this? Because it's basically, when you're watching slow-mo as well, it's kind of wild.
Okay, pause. Hold on. Pause. Okay. So I'm, Blah, you want to pause that quickly?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say just a quick explainer on what the chopsticks are and what we just watched. And then I want you to tell me your reaction when you saw that and how you saw it. Because I remember instantly where it was. I know exactly where it was. I know what I was doing. This is the 5th Starship launch. And after the 4th one, Elon said that they're going to try to catch the Starship booster. And then he posted a video of, you remember Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi catching a fly with chopsticks? And he's like, that's what we're going to do. So again, just to walk through the size here of this launch tower, this is a 480-foot launch tower. And it's trying to catch something that weighs between 150 to 200 tons. That's the booster, right? That's the Starship booster. Now, there's 2 mechanical arms. So if you haven't seen it yet, I'm just going to try to describe to you. I'm standing with my arms out, okay? And like that's kind of what the tower looks like. And the booster is landing between my arms. Now here's the crazy thing. People are watching the video and they saw that there are these fins. So there's 4 fins on the booster, and that helps with guiding the booster down to the launch tower. Now, fun fact about those fins, they use the same motors as Tesla. So there's cross functionality here between the 2 companies, Elon's car company and his space company. But when you look at Bilal, if you could play that second video we had teed up, it just shows the hooks. There's these hooks on the booster. You can't even realize, maybe Rafa could play it for us, but like they're tiny relative to the rest of the structure or the vessel. And people are losing their minds realizing that the entire weight of the booster was caught by the chopstick arms. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so just leave it there and people can see it. Is these hooks, as you can see, below, you see the bottom right photo there? That's it shows you the humans. Yeah, you see the humans inside? Yeah, here. Look at the humans.
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, so that gives you. So these things are huge, right? So the fins are about the size of like maybe 3 or 4 king beds, and then the hooks look tiny relative to everything. But that's what was caught. If you actually scroll down, can you scroll down 2 more images? So if you go down one, scroll down 1 to the next tweet. You guys are gonna laugh. Again, I'll explain to the listeners. So this is so for the listeners, this is how they test the stress test the Mechazilla arms to see if they can hold the booster. These balls, I mean, what are we looking at? What are these bags?
They look like balls, let's be honest.
Yeah, there's like giant balls, and I mean, people are just joking. It's like, yo, these bags are like... And then this video shows what these bags are. They're filling these bags with 100 tons of water.
Oh my...
Now, can you go down one more?
What is the purpose of those?
Stress testing the arms to do the chopstick catch.
Oh, got it. Okay,
now here and full screen this. We don't need sound. So I'm going to describe this for the listeners. This video is of the hooks, and you can see the hooks and the fins. This is released by SpaceX. when you watch this video, you see how little room
Jesus
for error there is and how this booster is caught. Dude, how insane is this?
That is wild.
Okay, so now let me zoom out because we're in awe right now. But the whole point is, okay, why are they catching this booster? It's because they don't want to waste, I think it's either 33 or 36 Raptor engines at the bottom of the booster. They want to be able to reuse it. Now,
how much this whole rocket setup, how much money is this worth? Like, because do you have any idea? I mean, it's a crazy
each
amount
launch
of money.
is it costs 50 to 100 million. I don't know the exact number.
But regardless, I mean, it's an insane amount of money. And historically, when NASA did all of this, when we went to the moon, all that sort of stuff, again, I don't know that much about this stuff, but the reason this is so important is because to be able to get to Mars, you're going to need to be able to bring the cost down significantly, right? That's the whole premise of SpaceX, pretty much. So to be able to reuse the rocket, to reuse all this stuff is the main point of this. That's why everyone's
celebrating. For example, it's like the Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy, which are the previous rockets. We've all seen, what's crazy is we've seen reusability. He's landing SpaceX, and so shout out to Gwynne Shotwell too, the COO and who runs day-to-day at SpaceX. And obviously Elon is super involved, but I think Gwynne is much more in the managerial, commerce, and like government relations side. Elon obviously engineering like crazy, right? And capital raising. So the thing with SpaceX is they already got the Falcons. We've all seen it, right? We're like, what's crazy is that we're so used to seeing these freaking rockets he's launching, the Falcons, landing in literally drone barges in the middle of the ocean. It's one of the craziest thing ever, right? And just to give an idea of how efficacious this method has been for SpaceX, I think they did 90 to 90% of all tonnage that went to space last year, and probably this year at this point too, came from SpaceX, right? Complete monopoly of the industry. And they've obviously, a lot of the tonnage that they send up. So what is the business is they sent the Starlink, which is the low Earth orbit satellite constellation that gives
Leo,
internet.
People call
Leo.
it. Right?
And then, all right, so I mean, other parts of the business other than this Starlink, which has been an incredible money stream for the company, is they'll do stuff like, picking up astronauts because Boeing was just sent two astronauts to the International Space Station. They can't get their shit together, and Boeing's Starliner was deemed unsafe to bring the astronauts back, so they're stuck there until February. Elon's gonna go get them. SpaceX team's gonna get them in the Dragon capsule, but they send people to ISS, the International Space Station. Without SpaceX, it'd be reliant on Russia right now. Like, this is 100% a fact. Without SpaceX, the United States of America would be relying on the Russian space program to go back and forth from the ISS. Guessing that wouldn't be working too well right now. All right, Bilal, so I know you looked into this previously, but also in the lead up to this podcast we're going to do is can you talk about why reusability is important?
Yeah, so from my understanding, it's really just about bringing down the cost of space travel. Everything that they're doing, putting satellites up there, going to save the astronauts, all that sort of stuff. But most importantly, if you're trying to go further and you're trying to go to Mars and actually take humans there, you're going to need to bring the cost down significantly.
1,000 times, basically.
1,000 times, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the analogy I always use is if you have to fly across the Atlantic.
If you're going to Japan and you need to stop 17 times and you need to basically get rid of the airplane every time, that'll be a lot, yeah? So.
Well, the other way to put it too is I think the number they have here is like $100 a ton. Just think about that. They've reduced the cost of sending stuff to space by a factor of 10x, right? And just think about how economies change. The best analogy probably just from a human experience is like the river transport system, which you've talked about here. Is like if you have a river near and the cost of transportation on a river versus like horse and cart, it's orders of a magnitude less. You can just do a lot different things, right? It's like, what can you carry over long distances on a horse and cart versus a river, right? It's like, so Austin already.
Have you seen this before? I don't actually, I haven't looked at this properly, but Austin, CEO of Bloom Tech, he shared this, the falling launch cost to orbit, cost per kilogram.
Per kilogram.
Do you understand much about what is happening in this?
Yeah. It's just like they've reduced it from 26,000 for the Saturn V for a ton down to 100. It's a factor of whatever that is, 2,500 reduction
crazy,
in cost. And just, I mean, here, you want to know why it was called the Silk Road, the famous route between Asia and Europe, right? Why was it called the Silk Road? It's because silk was highly valuable, but also super, like, it doesn't weigh a lot, right? So you could travel the entire distance. But that changes what you can and cannot send into space, right? It's like, if the only thing you could send around the world was silk, that wouldn't be very good for global trade. But ocean travel, right? Using the river systems is allowing large volumes of things like spices to be sent long distances, right? And the similar idea has to be used for what SpaceX and what the space economy can be. So, but I actually want to ask you, this is where the imagination comes in. Because a lot of the skeptics about all of this, they're like, okay, we get the Starlink. Yeah, we get the satellite stuff. Cool. We understood. And then people will complain about, these satellite constellations are like ruining the view of space. It's like, I don't fully buy that. But there's that part of it. Other than the satellite economy, which we will talk about more, is like, what other things did you see would be as part of the space economy?
I think the big one is materials, right?
Yeah.
Because if you just think of how many materials we're working with, just with the Earth's resources versus what you find out in the ether, basically, there's so many materials that can be brought back and used. And so that could be just basically it's under the umbrella of innovation from space, like finding things that you can reuse on Earth is another big part of why this matters, sort of thing.
And now, then what is the biggest reason for him? And what's the main reason for Elon to do this?
So he wants to be multi-planet species.
Exactly.
Right? So
why is that important?
Well, because if a comet hits the Earth, then we're all done. Or there's multiple reasons. There's multiple reasons why the Earth longer term could be in danger. Now, I will say, if you want to speak, there are people who will try to steelman that argument and say, well, there's plenty of things to work on here. For example, climate, right? Which, funnily enough, he's also working on now. And I also want to say up front, this is not a big up Elon, all things go podcast, right? We're normally quite I try to be anyway, quite objective about it. I think especially right now, we're basically a few weeks out from the US election, and is the most divisive it's been with him in particular. And so that's what the whole point of this podcast is, to be able to say, this is really cool what's happening. The whole point of pod is the latest business, technology, and memes, right? And he sits at the intersection of all three of those things, right? And this is objectively incredible, cool stuff. Whatever you think of him politically, all that sort of stuff, how he behaves on Twitter, that you're allowed to think what you want to think about that. But objectively, what happened this week was really, really incredible. Now, I did, I was reading the Tim Urban post on SpaceX. I was listening to a few pods on it. The summary I got here were, if there was 5 things that were important for space travel, survival of humanity, pushing technological boundaries, inspiring the next generation of explorers, essentially. The idea of human nature is to explore, right? We've always done that, going to new lands and that sort of stuff. And then the last one, scaling civilization beyond Earth. Those were the 5 big points. And so I think, like you said, a lot of people will say, what's the point of all this? Is it just, the surface level is, are billionaires just going out in space because they're big kids and they want to go and do all that? I also think if people want to do that, and that's, he's earned the right to go and do that. When you look at the history of this, he went essentially, got this company in a place where it's the first private company to do this at this level. And you're basically competing with US, Russia, and China.
Nation states.
Nation states.
Hundreds of millions or billions of people.
Yeah. And the other piece of context I wanted to share was, if you go back to, the moon landing and the space race, that contest between the US and Russia, and the amount of money that was invested by NASA and the US government, essentially, and the Russian government and others. China has obviously, invested a lot now as well. It was roughly about 5% of GDP, or 5% of the government's budget, essentially, right, in the 60s, 70s. By the time we got to the moon, since then, it went down to 1%, and now I think it was around 0.5%. So it just became less of a priority. And not only was it lesser priority going into space in general and investing in that, but also specifically the moon itself, because we basically haven't done moon landing since then. So you can say like, well, now the focus is go to Mars. The focus was do all the satellite stuff and all the stuff that's actually useful for the Earth. For example, when you're using Google Maps on your phone and you've got GPS, obviously that is happening because of satellites in the sky. And when you don't have signal and you're wandering around France like you were, and there's a GPS still working, it's because the satellites are still working there for you. So that's just one tiny example of hundreds of things that have been applied because of the advancement into space. But yeah, anything else on that part, Tron, that you want to add?
I want to just you brought up a good point, right? Again, it's not a rah-rah session, and we're not going to go overly into political stuff, but let's give a very simple example. The same week that the Starship booster was caught by Mechazilla Chopsticks, the state of California wouldn't allow SpaceX to launch on the coast of the state because of tweets that Elon sent. Like it's become so politicized that they're not allowing what clearly is arguably the most innovative company in the world right now to launch and move forward, as you say, to explore space, develop the seeds of a space economy, literally for politics, right? And if you were to look at his all-in bet clearly on Trump and the Republican Party, large part of it is this idea of like the regulatory state, right? It's like they moved Tesla, X, and SpaceX out of California to Texas. And it's not to say that there's no place for a regulatory body to do its job, but in California, if anybody's been following what's going on in California in the past decade, Peter Thiel on the Rogan podcast had the analogy of like, if you actually look at Saudi Arabia and California, that's his new mental model of California, is like this kind of wokeism is similar to the Islamic fundamentalism that the MBS and the family that has ruled Saudi Arabia for the past century have had, because they have to have this religious agreement because how important Saudi Arabia is to Islam with Mecca. And in exchange, they get to use the money from the oil to have political legitimacy. So the way that Peter Thiel said it with California was, well, the equivalent for him, it's not a one-on-one, but it's like, there's this kind of woke progressive movement that can do whatever it wants. In exchange, the Silicon Valley gets to create all this wealth, which is equivalent to the oil, is in his telling of it. And it really warps incentives and things, right? So, that's kind of like, does that make sense on my overarching view of like why I think he's making this all in bet? I think a big part of it is he's seeing that one side will be, listen, it's business, right? Of course, you're going to have incentives. It's like, okay, which side is going to be easier for me to push my agenda forward?
Yeah, and that's it, because who knows the full intent, because we don't know him, we're not in his mind to know exactly, but I agree. I think he sees obviously this side is going to help him with his own objectives, and you can say, does he have ideas around it will actually be better for the country, etc. Who knows the truth behind that? But clearly he's pinned himself to one side. And I will say, you've read a bunch about him and all that sort of stuff, so this all-in nature that he has. I'll contrast Elon's approach right now politically with Michael Jordan. Like Michael Jordan famously said, Republicans buy sneakers too, right? Do you remember that? We've talked about it on the pod. Now Elon is like going all in on Twitter, got the MAGA hat on, doing his thing. And did you see this poker game example? You've heard of this one before. I don't know if this is true, but there's a story.
Oh, it's from the Walter Isaacson book. He basically, he just kept on going all in a game.
Yeah, he was playing poker with a group, and he basically didn't even, play properly. He didn't even know the rules fully. He wasn't a regular player, someone who plays poker, and he basically just kept going all in. And then he would keep losing, and then he would buy more chips, go all in. But then when he actually finally won, he knew to call it. He's like, actually, I'm going to walk away at this point. Now, I don't know, if that's like a sensationalized story, but regardless, I think it's a good contrast of, if you look at his companies, what he's done that pretty much each time.
Well, you have to remember, it's like he voted for, I think he even voted for Biden in 2020. He definitely voted for Obama in 08 and 12. and I'm not sure where he was in 16, but I mean, he's a lifelong Democrat, and his business, ventures. I mean, Tesla is the most. It was a progressive darling, right? For the left, for the climate. Is like, so. I mean, we're not going to go too much deeper in this, but it's clearly complicated. And but you have to think. I think the point that you brought up with All In is like, for somebody to risk this much, every other headline from the mainstream media is like destroyed his reputation over X, or like gone to this battle, gone to this fight. It's like, what you have to ask yourself is, why would someone make this bad? And the shorthand is just like, oh, he's just completely lost it, is what some people will say. Right, and then you watch him lead SpaceX and catch a skyscraper with Mechazilla arms. That doesn't look like to me somebody has lost it. Right, it's like it looks like to me somebody has this a mission they want to accomplish, and this bet they're making signals how important of a decision this upcoming election is in his eyes. There's signal there. You can choose whatever you want from that signal. It's like, to me, it's pretty clear. It's like, to make exactly like you said, it's the opposite of the Michael Jordan Republicans buy sneakers too, where it's like, be politically agnostic. And that's what Zuck's
you could argue,
now.
Again, we really do try to stay away from politics on the pod. Honestly, mainly because it's kind of becomes quite boring, repetitive. We're surrounded by it all the time, and we kind of need a break from it ourselves. You could argue if that's a good strategy or not, or if it's like playing both sides could actually help him long term as well. Also, just having a consumer facing platform like Twitter being so divisive means, certain people don't want to use his platform as well. So, I don't think he's behaved completely perfectly either, right? Like, he definitely riles up people and stuff like that.
No, of course, right? Like,
and so that's
could
that's
you be
the
more
point.
tactful, right? It's like,
completely. But regardless, we can say both things here, right? Like, you can criticize him all you want, and I will criticize him for sure at times. But I can also say, man, like, what he's done in the business regard is absolutely insane. And there's not really too many people that come close to anything like it. And in our time, it's basically is the person who's made the most, like, if you think of like what I study on Creator Lab, right? It's literally going from idea to business, nonprofit, whatever your idea is, making that come to life. There's not another person who's done it like him. So I have a lot of respect for obviously what he's done there. Like most people, I'm sure.
Blah, one thing I wanted to jump on that you'd mentioned from the list of 5 is I think, because, other than going to multi-planetary species, people can understand that, right? It's like a backup, an insurance. But actually, one of the other points you brought up, you said kind of like this idea of it's in human nature to explore. I think that's probably underrated because it does feel abstract, but think about what you said about these countries that went to space, right? Like in the 60s when the United States of America spent 5% of its GDP to go to the moon. JFK famously said in his inauguration speech, or quite early in his administration, is like, we will be in the moon by the end of this decade. Is like crystallizing an idea. It's just human nature 101. It's very difficult to motivate people. It's very difficult to get everybody making sacrifices and pulling in the same direction. And you may not agree with these high-minded goals, right? But the reality is that to get the most talented people in the world, the people that don't need money, like think about the talent at SpaceX, right? They're not doing this for the money. Like they could,
the world's leading rocket scientists, and
it's like they could go work for a fraction of the amount of stress that they're putting themselves through. But that's
this
not
is
the
clearly
point.
for them. And that's another thing I will say. Like, big up those people, because like the people who they've been working on this for so long now, and the amount of challenges. We could do a 5-hour podcast about all the specific challenges they had to overcome to make this company become a reality. Insane levels of innovation and creativity, basically. But it does take someone to be so crazy to say, we're going to go to Russia and go and try buy a rocket, and we're going to go and convince people to give private money for this, and then we're going to go and talk to the government.
Actually, let's tease out that beginning story, right? The origin story of SpaceX is insane. it's been written about. You just touched on one of the kind of like, it's not myth, it's true, but it's like it's become mythology within the company in the space industry and for entrepreneurship, right? It's like, after PayPal, Elon walked away with about 180 mil. He put 30 mil into Tesla, 30 mil into Tesla, or 20 mil into Tesla, 10 mil into Solar City, and 150 mil into SpaceX. So the most he put was into SpaceX, and the initial
going all in, as we said.
Yeah, all in. And the seed of that idea was actually, he went on the NASA the NASA website in about 2001 or 2002, late 2001 or early 2002. He's like, he went to the section. He's like, hey man, I wonder when the mission to Mars is. It's like, let's check out this calendar.
On the roadmap, yeah.
Nothing, right? So he's like, man, it's like, we've really lost this drive to want to explore, which you touched on. It is, right? It's because it's motivating. It's a coordinating mechanism, is a high-minded goal, is a coordinating mechanism. And he basically said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to send mice to Mars, like literally send mice to Mars as a way to get people interested in it again. And then the way they're going to do it, you touched on it, they're going to go to Russia and use, he had 150 mil at his disposal. He's like, I want to buy 3 decommissioned ICBMs, so intercontinental ballistic missiles. These are the vehicles that you'd send nukes on, right? So like this is post-Cold War, or late 2001, early 2002, and Russia has a lot of these lying around, but they fly there, and famously the Russian army guys are just like, who is this guy? Like spat in his shoes and like, it's like, yo, little boy, like get out of here. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe we'll take your money. He said he would give them, he's willing to pay 21 million for 3, so $7 million each. And the guy goes 21 million for each. So he wanted 63 million. You touched on it. On the flight back from that trip, they did a bunch, but on the last one, he was literally on his computer, a laptop in a spreadsheet. So I actually tweeted the story out, and Elon replied with a rocket just to be like, yo, this is OG story. He was just like, look at the cost to manufacture rockets, just like first principles. What is the cost of every part of this? And
there's no chat GPT then for this,
There's like, and there's no Wi-Fi. So like the formulas weren't saved. He was like just clicking. He's like, oh, man, it looks like we could do this for 1/50th of the cost. And they just turned around to his teams like, we can just build our own rocket. And like, insane, right? It's just absolutely insanity.
That Excel sheet, man. I wonder if he's ever put that up, because that would be
incredible, right?
Working in public, as the
thread boys like to say. I think I'll just wrap with that. And the thing to look for now is that was the 5th Starship launch. They're going to try to catch, it sounds like, the entire Starship rocket on the 6th launch. And they're, this is optimistic, and we're going to talk a little about this at the Tesla We Robot event that happened last week, which was quite popular when they did the Robotaxi, the Robovan, and the Optimus robots. Timelines, right? Like, when we're talking about Elon, and, not everything is just the pom-poms out. He's notorious for these timelines. He even says it. He's like, I think he had a quote like, we turn the impossible into delays, right? It's like, I'm going to give you a timeline. A lot of it is for his company, right? It's not really for public consumption, except for Tesla's a public company. So there's that kind of tension. But the timelines that he's putting on notoriously misses a lot of them, and they are very aggressive. So he wants to go to first mission to Mars just to send a Starship. I don't know any human that would want to try that first one, but 2026, because it takes, I think, 18 months for Mars to go around the sun. And obviously it's, but Earth goes in the same direction. But their window is called like the launch window. When they're aligned, it only opens up every 26 months. So they're going to try 2026. You decide if you believe it's going to happen. Again, we're just going to tell you the facts. Here's everything we say. You decide for yourself.
Yeah. And I will say, just to wrap it up on that great summary there, Trung, in prep for this, I reread... I think I read it a few years ago when I had Tim Urban on Creator Lab, Wait But Why, writer, founder, writer of Wait But Why. If you want to break from all the chaos of what's going on in the world right now, and you want to just be a little bit inspired by space, which was kind of what I was just going in with, that curiosity to understand. My main question going in was, what is the point of going to space, essentially? Like very basic stuff. And it's not just about Elon and SpaceX. is about like space in general, like why we went originally to the moon, all the government roles, all the different. He goes into details about the satellites in space, and the Hubble telescope. Like a fun fact, I think I remember off the top of my head was something like if you were holding up the telescope from Boston to Japan, you could see a pair of fireflies from Boston to Japan using that.
Oh, with the power of the telescope. Wow.
Exactly. If the Earth was flat. So hopefully we don't get flagged on YouTube now because I said that phrase. But yeah, but just like I had no idea about that, and just kind of the insane levels of kind of innovation and stuff that has gone, into all of this over the last 50, 60, 70 years. So yeah, I would highly recommend you reading that. Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to say something actually that you had mentioned. So you had said that there's a lot of spin-off and innovation, right? But like we should actually talk about that quickly, because again, that's an abstract idea. People are like, why would I go to space? Like, why are we spending all this money, right? The amount of spin-off technologies are absolutely insane, okay? So let me just give you an idea about the amount of money that NASA was spending, what came out of that. So when NASA was established as the space organization in 1958, part of its mandate from the US government was to commercialize the technology that came out of the research process, because that's a lot of taxpayer money, right? It's like, okay, if we're going to give 5% of GDP, it's like, you got to give taxpayers something. So there have been over 2,000 commercialized products and services. I mean, there's a point that NASA was doing like a monthly magazine to be like, part of it is PR, right? They gotta, if the citizenry is like, hey, we're putting 5% of GDP, which to give you an idea, I think the equivalent now for 5% of GDP would be something like 10%, maybe $1 or $2 trillion. No, 2+ trillion. That's be how much that the current 2024 US government would have to spend on space to equal 5% of GDP. And I mean, can you imagine to give Elon $2 trillion? You know what SpaceX could accomplish? I mean, that's the whole point. It doesn't even need the money. It's like the constraint is the point, right? But here's some things that have been invented using NASA spin-off technology. Okay, CAT scans are from NASA spin-off technology. Why? Space programs required quality digital images. Baby formula. Why baby formula? It was an algae-based ingredient which astronauts could eat, and it could be held for a long time in space, right? Foil blankets. Lightweight insulated blankets often used in emergency settings. Memory foam. Bro, you got
That's
memory
key.
foam? That's for the seats in the planes. Insulation, because you got to insulate the space vehicles. The computer mouse was invented from space technology. Ear thermometers. So that's how you, so shout out to ear thermometers. This one's easy. Freeze-dried food. We get that, right?
Yeah.
Cell phone cameras, same deal. Digital images. This one's my favorite. Heat-resistant ceramics. So when the vessel's coming back in, like the space shuttle, you got to protect it with heat-resistant ceramic. Do you have a big green egg barbecue? Have you ever seen those things?
No, I've seen it, but I don't have one now.
That's using the heat-resistant ceramic from NASA.
Trung, I don't know if you've got this on your list. Sorry, just another one that's like heart monitors.
Yep.
I've seen here. The portable battery-operated heart monitors used in hospitals today trace the routes the system used to monitor astronauts' vital signs during space missions. Laser eye surgery, LASIK, which I've had, is using the tracking eye movements that were used in space. So you can keep going, but I thought those two are pretty impressive.
No, those are amazing. Last one I'll say is water purification. Pretty important. So that's it for I know that we still got some haters on this pod being like, oh, why are we going, man? Okay, there you go.
And look, people allowed their own opinion. I get it.
Oh, why are we going?
Yeah, and I will say, Trung, outside, I know you're joking around, but I get like when I was trying to be intellectually honest with myself and say, when I first heard about basically nerds going to space, I was like, what's the point, right? And that was my initial thing until you start digging. You realize, okay, we used to care about this in society. And more than anything, in the 60s, 70s, if you speak to your parents, right, you ask them, where were you for the moon landing? All of them were watching it, right? Like they were watching it at home. They were all being inspired. And the cool thing is, if you're on the left, you're on the right, you're pro-Trump or pro-Kamala, whatever, back in the day, everyone was following this and being inspired by, oh, that's something really cool that as humans we came together, Russia, US, China, like whatever, we're all working towards one thing. And not to sound like some idealistic 18-year-old, but that is something we need a bit more of right now. So
100%.
When I read through this, I was like, wow, that actually shows there are things that can be created when you bring people together. So
well, Bilal, let's wrap up with this. Where were you watching it when you saw it? Like, where were you?
Oh, this one, I was actually walking and I saw it on Twitter on my phone. I just saw that video.
You're walking on with Twitter on? Damn, bro.
No, I think I got like a buzz. I think one of you guys sent a message in the thing, and I was trying to read it, and then it popped up on the feed.
Fair enough. I'll tell you where I was super quickly. Is I was preparing a thing of oatmeal for my son. And I usually shouldn't be looking at the phone in the morning because that ruined my morning with my son, if I'm being honest. As soon as I saw it, I'm just like, okay, I got to put out some memes and tweets. No, I saw it, man. I knew they were going to try, and I knew that the 5th launch was happening that morning, but I wasn't fully tracking time-wise. It had happened an hour before I woke up. And then, but when I woke up, Elon posted that video that you showed of them catching it. So
my favorite is the cheering, like, because the sound makes it, because it looks like a movie, right? Like you've seen the Interstellar, like all the different movies, Apollo 13, whatever it was, all the mad scenes. So yeah, it was very cool. Trung, I do want to talk about Tesla Waymo. Should we quickly touch on that?
Transition.
And Nvidia. Yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Let us know. By the way, I think you can comment on Spotify. A few people have been commenting on that. You're welcome to comment on there on YouTube as well. Tesla versus Waymo. Obviously, Tesla had a lot of things going on this week with some announcements too. So what happened?
Well, so the big outlines that event called We Robot, and this is where the timeline thing that we brought up with Elon and Tesla specifically, it has been brought up as a point of controversy. So we talked previously about full self-driving, which is the software package. It's called supervised full self-driving because the name full self-driving is actually quite contradictory if you still have to have your hand on the wheel. But we talked about my experience with it. And, for what I had said in that episode was it felt like a ChatGPT moment in the real world for me, in the sense of I was like, ooh, wow. I fully see a world where autonomy is happening. Because I've never done a Waymo. Have you done a Waymo?
No, not in person. I've seen videos. I have friends who've posted on Instagram and stuff, but...
And your friends are they're quite amazed by it, right? And,
people love it.
Former Google, still owned by Google, so former Google employee here, Bilal.
So
people, when he says that people love it, just take that with a grain of salt.
We got to get the once a week back up. We got to keep our record up there, yeah.
No, but the interesting battle, let me frame the 50,000 foot level with Tesla and its robotaxi event, was that there are a bunch of competitors in China right now that are doing very well with autonomous driving. And in the United States, there's Waymo, which I think at this point has done over 100,000 trips. And mind you, this has been a 15-year journey for Google and its self-driving car division. So it wasn't just Elon saying like self-driving cars is coming next year, right? It's like Waymo has been talking about this for ages. And Waymo, though, it seems in the past year, their product has really hit the nail on the head. As in, again, I haven't done Waymo, but I have friends that have done it, and the reviews are all A+. And they start in San Francisco and Arizona. So areas that could be really mapped out. And the criticism was always like, of Waymo, there's two criticisms of Waymo. And the way to think about Tesla versus Waymo, robotaxi versus Waymo, is Tesla is trying to be low cost, and that's their approach. Low cost and crucially, using AI and cameras only as a solution. Waymo has LiDAR, which is the special sensor. The
thing that goes around so you kind of see the force field or whatever around the car.
Exactly.
Right?
It basically shoots light signals out and catches back and remaps the world in 3D. That advantage is significant over just camera. Camera is not as good as depth. That's kind of the criticism.
It's basically forking, like we talk about in crypto all the time. Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin. Is this going to be for cash or is it going to be digital gold?
Right.
Ethereum, Solana, like those sorts of things. This is the same thing. It's like philosophy is manifesting.
Exactly. So the point of contention with Elon that people will say to criticize the camera-only perspective. So Elon goes, well, humans can drive with only your eyes, right? That's his whole point. But the difficulty is that when you're launching this type of product, self-driving cars, and we've talked about it, right? It's like 40 to 50,000 Americans die in car crashes a year. It's even if you got self-driving down to 30,000, that's not enough to convince people, right? It's like it's the PR battle to convince people that it's fine to save lives. You have to be like it's 10% of the lives lost, right? 90% reduction to really get people over the hurdle, because one accident with a autonomous vehicle is so visceral, right? It's the whole. You want to get a little bit dark, but you talk about Joseph Stalin's like the quote that may have been misattributed to him is like, a million is a statistic, but a single is a tragedy, right? It's like a single example. It's like humans are mapped to feel these stories. So back to the Waymo versus Tesla. So at the We Robot event, Elon said that within 2 years, these robo-taxis, which are two-seaters with a big screen inside, so kind of like a shrunk-down Cybertruck is the way that Marquez Brownlee described it. He went to the event, and he wants to get out at $30,000. Okay, so right now, do you know how much a Waymo costs with the whole lidar? It costs about $200,000, $150,000 to $200,000, right? So for a reality where these cars are everywhere, right? A full fleet of them. I think right now there's a fleet of maybe 100 Waymos, or maybe 200 Waymos. To get a full fleet out there, Google would have to spend 50 to 100 billion on its current cost of hardware. Granted, manufacturing costs will go down on lidar if you do it at such volume, but we're talking 6-7 times price difference. Again, take Elon's number with a grain of salt. Let's just say it's 50,000 for a robo-taxi, right? It's still a 4 times cost advantage. So you, all things equal, you'll be able to deploy, 4 to 5 times more cars. And then just like how Uber worked is like, you need driver density, right? Or vehicle density to build these networks. So that's kind of like the bigger picture with the Waymo. And there's a couple points I will say about Waymo that a good blog is Understanding AI by Timothy Lee. He actually interviewed the CEO of Waymo about some criticisms that Waymo has, right? So the main one with Waymo is that they need to hard code everything, which that was true for a while. By hard code everything, I mean you have to fully map out a city street and be like, okay, you get to this street, you turn right. Like you have to just say it, right? You have to explain it literally what the car does when it reaches this point. Whereas a Tesla full self-driving approach is an end-to-end neural network. It's basically taking the ChatGPT model where you train the software to make the decisions, like, they guess the next token essentially based on previous probability. You see a stop sign and there's a bike coming over here. What is the next token?
And Trung, though, just real quick, because I saw someone actually tweet this this week. I guess is the criticism of that approach, though, that if visually the Tesla system hasn't seen it before, then it can be dangerous. Okay.
And it can hallucinate like the way ChatGPT hallucinates. Yeah. Exactly, right? But then that becomes a problem, though. It's like you have to live in a world where will it ever figure that out? Because the idea that you can hard code every situation is absurd, right? It's absurd. So Waymo's challenge, they're not going to be a world
where there's a combination, though?
Well, the combination is this. Waymo actually rebutted saying, actually, we're using end-to-end neural networks. Well? Yeah. And okay. But they have the other part of it. They have remote drivers. That's it. They have a remote driving system, right? And that's a big piece of the puzzle. The other big pieces of the puzzle is, let's just walk away from just the software for a second, right? If you're running a fleet of robo-taxis, because like the Tesla robo-taxi doesn't have a steering wheel, right? Like even Waymo has a steering wheel. So Tesla robotaxi does not have a steering wheel. First of all, that's gonna have to get by regulators, right? There's like, you're talking about this 2-year timeline. There's a lot of things that have to happen. But the other advantages that people give Waymo is this. So they've built out remote assistance to answer your question about like these super edge cases. You still have to have a human intervention. They have mechanics that are hired specifically to deal with, if a Waymo is stuck on this random road in like suburban San Francisco, they can send people to grab it, right? And then you have repair areas for these vehicles that are going to have much higher uses than a normal car. It's like, does Tesla have any of that ready? And Tesla's stock dropped 10% the day after this robot.
And this week is basically down that amount.
Exactly. Right? And like Uber and Lyft, their stocks were up by 10% because that was the trade. It's like, would Elon present a vision of a robotaxi that was clearly threatening to these businesses? Because the thing about Waymo still is it's still niche. It's still San Francisco. It's still Arizona. They're rolling out more. I think it's going to Los Angeles. By the way, they've spent $30 billion on this. It's insane, right? Google. So those are things that I think about. Just to summarize, there's a software side. So the software battle is full end-to-end neural network, like ChatGPT style. There's that. And Tesla has a huge advantage because they have 5 million cars on the road, data collecting constantly. Although I'll give you the rebuttal of that. The rebuttal of that is if you have an overabundance of data, you actually, it's harder to tease out every single thing. Whereas Waymo is still training with people in the cars. But Tesla can easily fix that. The other thing is the remote assistance. Will you have remote assistance? There was no mention of it at this Tesla event. Will you have service, mechanics, a whole fleet of these ancillary businesses that are required to run a fleet of hundreds of thousands of taxis? No mention of it, right? And so yeah, that's what it is. Let me throw it to you in the sense of when you saw the event, did anything stick out?
No, honestly, I didn't actually follow this one super closely. I just saw like some cool looking videos, but I didn't follow it properly.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so the things I'll add on is like, so that's kind of the Waymo versus Tesla battle. I like how you said it. It's like, it's very philosophical, right? It's like, which way is going to work? Is it going to be the fully kitted out Google version that can do it at volume? Or will Tesla, with its many vehicles on the road, be able to crack this puzzle, the fully just camera, and get costs down to 20,000, 30,000 a vehicle?
Yeah. There was a AMA question. We're going to, just for Inside Baseball, we're recording straight after this an AMA episode for next week that you guys will hear. There was a specific question someone asked about it, so we will revisit that in the next one as well.
Oh, no. Why don't we just ask it now? We can hit it.
All right, go on. Let's just do that.
Yeah, find it.
You're right.
Go ahead.
Right, since it's more. So this was a question from Ray Foley. He said the Wii Robot event. He said, is Elon hiding bad numbers with the Wii Robot event? Also, is the personal robot the biggest opportunity for the future? Let's answer the second one in I think next episode.
I don't know what the bad numbers thing is. I don't know if I wouldn't say he's hiding bad numbers. I think the criticism event was like there was actually there was nothing super tangible about the robotaxi, right? Other than here's the deadline we're trying to hit, and then people were like, everything we just mentioned, everything I just talked about, the ancillaries, the remote is like,
okay,
the insurance, the regulators is like, that wasn't really discussed, right? And there's also the robo van, and again, that's another thing that perceptually that was kind of visually interesting, but not a ton of details on that. So I think 50,000 foot levels, they're putting a stake in the ground the way you had described it. Kind of the fork is like, these are the two ways, is making it very explicit. These are the two ways we're seeing the world and the future of self-driving vehicles. These are the two paths we're going to take. And I think that's what more of this event was for. And now the robot question, the second part of that.
If we're going to have personal robots?
Yeah. I mean, those, well, let's start with the criticism of that. This is from the Marquez Brownlee. So he said it was it. I mean, if you saw some of the clips coming out of it, looked incredible. You had these Optimus robots, which I don't know if you saw 6 months ago. Like these things went from like, the joke with these robots is they walk like they shit their pants, and like, and there's like, and even like the Boston Dynamics one, right? Is like, they do cool stuff, but then like you ask him to do the most normal thing, like put his hand up, and it's like the most like awkward movement ever. But these Optimus robots were moving super naturally, playing rock, paper, scissors, playing charade, pouring beer, walking around. And it came out later that these were remote operated. And, the criticism of the remote operated is like they're not fully autonomous, which I mean, that was probably the perception that was trying to be given of what the future would look like. But man, if those things, the fact that they can't even move like that, remotely operated, is insane. Like we're talking the progress that we've seen over the past year of what the Optimus robots can do. And the other thing I'd say about, to answer the question is like, is this the biggest opportunity? Is it's clearly a massive opportunity. And I think Tesla's best placed, particularly in the West, because apparently in China there's a lot of. I mean, China's really good at manufacturing and robotics, right? But they just do not have the PR edge that the West, particularly Elon, has, and the opportunity is massive, and these robots, I would say, have the AI edge of Tesla in the real world application, the physical world application of artificial intelligence and autonomy. I think it's unmatched in the West, right? It's like they would be able to pour over. Think about Tesla vehicles, the Model 3, the Model X, the Model Y. These are basically robots, right? And they can already
You mean because of the self-driving, you mean?
Yeah. Like, they can do robotic things autonomously already. It's like you're transferring that with vision over to robots. I think, it's a massive opportunity. I couldn't even put a number on what the opportunity would be.
Yeah.
It'd be in the trillions. And I think Tesla is not, I don't know the China space well enough, but I know they have really good companies. In the West, it's a no-brainer. They're the best place for this.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to quickly just talk for 2 minutes on Nvidia all-time high? We do need to record the other stuff as well. So how are you doing for time?
Let's, this is a good point. I think it's a good segue. We love good segues here. So let's talk about Nvidia. Nvidia hit an all-time high, 3.4 trillion. And I'll just run through a couple fun facts. The main point of the fun facts is this, though. I highly recommend people go listen to the BG2 podcast. The BG2 references Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner, obviously famous investors. They had Brad Gerstner and one of his colleagues had Jensen Huang on, the CEO of Nvidia, founder CEO. And they were pushing Jensen a bit on a couple things. So for people that haven't read this article, I think we touched on it briefly, but Sequoia Capital had this really great article about Nvidia and the AI space in June. So this is when Nvidia had become briefly, mid-trading day, the most valuable company in the world. Okay, and then it fell down that same day. And now, as we mentioned earlier, it's the second in the world as of this Tuesday recording. But the whole point of that Sequoia Capital article was essentially there's a $500 billion gap or $600 billion gap between the amount of money being spent on Nvidia gear and the revenue that you'd expect to make. So I'll walk through the math really quickly. So Bilal, imagine that the estimates for an annual run rate of Nvidia is 150 billion, okay? So that's where they're basically headed right now. 150 billion in Nvidia chips. All right, so Nvidia chips, or just the chips, mostly from Nvidia, is about half the cost of an AI data center. So if half the cost of an AI data center is 150 billion, that means that AI data center spend will be 300 billion, right? So you 2x it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so now take the main companies buying this kit. XAI, Google, Amazon, Meta, all the big tech companies. What revenue would they need to pay back for the AI data centers? So the Sequoia article just says, very simply, software margins are 50%. Just call it napkin math. So you'd have to have 2x the $300 billion spend. So it's like you would expect $600 billion in revenue to basically break even on all of this AI data center spend. And then he just did some quick napkin math. He's like, I'll give AI related revenue 10 billion to all these companies. And then you actually think about it, it's like 10 billion for all these companies is pretty aggressive. It's like OpenAI is doing 5 billion in revenue ish, and they're losing 5 billion, right? So we're not even talking about the margin profile here. We're just talking only about the revenue. But let's be optimistic and say all these big tech companies, the 10 biggest ones, will get 10 billion AI related revenue, which is very optimistic. So that's 100 billion in revenue, and then you have 600 billion in spend. There's a $500 billion gap, right? So that's where we're at. Where is this 500 billion in revenue coming from? And I think how this ties back to the Tesla autonomy stuff is you need AI to solve just these massive problems, right? It can't just be enough that I get better autocomplete and you know what I mean? And that you can get bullet point emails. There needs to be massive industry change. But in my eye is like, it's a no-brainer that self-driving cars are going to be here in 10 years, everywhere, ubiquitous. That's a massive market right there, right? And then Jensen just goes on. Jensen obviously is going to talk his own book, but he's kind of justifying, he's getting pressed on Nvidia's valuation and their revenue numbers. And Brad Gerstner asked him specifically about the comparisons to the dot-com bubble. He's like, people are comparing you to Cisco. So if people don't remember, back in the late 1990s, Cisco, which does networking gear, they became the most valuable company in the world briefly. And now there's about $200 billion company, but they went from $1 trillion in the late 90s just doing networking gear. And people were like, is that Nvidia? Is Nvidia the infrastructure play for another bubble, right? And then this is Jensen's point. So I'm going to give you 3 Jensen points. One by one, I want your thoughts on them. Here's his first one. This is the thesis underlying Jensen's bull case. Of course, he's talking his own book, but he says this. GPUs and the way that AI computing is done is very different than Intel, right? And, a fun fact of history now.
GPU,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. CPU is generalized versus GPU, which is much more, it's done initially for computer graphics. Specific use cases, right? Excuse me. And so he's basically saying the GPU and the data centers built around these NVIDIA GPU chips, that's the future of computing. He's like saying that data center is actually a unit of computing now. And he's basically saying, if that's the future of computing, these paralyzing computation versus like the general chip from Intel, which is what Intel was doing. Intel's clap. Jensen Huang himself is worth more than Intel. Why don't you think about that? Intel's worth 100 billion. Jensen's worth 118, bro. That's insane. How crazy is that, bro?
Wow.
And so he's like saying, this way is the future because AI is going to change how software is done, right? Okay, so that's his thesis. And he's basically saying there's $1 trillion of existing data centers now that are CPU based. He's simplified it. It's like, if that needs to all get replaced, if you are the CFO or the CTO of a tech company now, and you already have these CPU based data centers, but the future is AI intermediated GPU, if you're going to spend $1 trillion, he's basically saying,
who are you going to?
Like, who is in the way of this fire hose of money? Well, so let me ask you that. Do you find that a compelling argument? But GPU-based data centers.
No, it's a great argument, but I honestly, because I don't know enough about the technical side of, do you actually need to upgrade all those or refit those CPU-based, data centers into GPU-based? I don't know if that's obviously the big assumption there. And also, I think that's the biggest part of this. If this was a pie chart, that's like 80% of it. And then the 20% is, are they going to Nvidia or are they going elsewhere or they're developing their own stuff or whatever? But I think the biggest lever there is, it's, do you actually need to go and do all that stuff? Because the question is, what are those data centers used for right now? And can those things still continue? Will they still be used for a long period of time, like the normal web without AI? Like, I don't know. I don't know enough about that.
That's what I'm saying. Is like this is what you bring up such a good point, and I love. That's why I wanted to give your, the devil's advocate hat, right? The actually guy, but like that's the main point, right? So that's the question. Is like, is AI intermediate software development the future, right? Because if it is, then to answer your question, and that's what he would say, because he actually says it in the podcast, he goes, if you have to spend $50 billion, would you spend it on this old data center or spend it on new? And he's like, if I was a CFO, I'd spend 100% on the new data center. I'm like, of course you'd say that. but like this, so that's that I just want to kind of give that for our listeners, like his mental framework. This is his hype man talking his own book mental framework. So you take that with the grain of salt and you decide if it's true, right? That I think that's the stress test here. It's like you decide if it's true.
I like the pitch though. I like
No, but I mean, but this is where, so that's one part of it. Here's the other one he says. So I'm going to ask you. He goes, I want you to think about these models. This is the worst they'll ever be, is what he's saying. Some people will say, actually, data is not going to solve this. This might be the peak. That's the contra, right? And he goes, he believes in the future that everyone will have the kind of this idea of the assistant, right? That we talked about with the Apple Intelligence episode. Is everybody will have this very intelligent assistant. It doesn't even have to be AGI. Just knows everything about you, and you can give it very clear instructions, and it can come back with you with an answer, right? And this was the analogy he made. He's like, that's no different than my job. I have 60 direct reports. My job as a leader is to define the problem set and define what I need done, and I just trust these people to figure it out, right? And he basically says, you talk about pitches, he goes, everyone in the future with these AI agents will be their own CEO. So the job you have to have is defining your problem set and letting your AI agents figure it out. So he's talking about the use of software. And like for that, that's going to require Nvidia chips. So again, talking his own book, how do you feel about that expression of how he feels software will be used in the future?
I think
everyone will be a CEO of their own AI agents. And this is like, take it from you typed on a typewriter, you typed in Microsoft Docs, and then now this is the new way of you're interacting with technology and intelligence.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assumption.
I mean,
he's got a good way of pitching here, right? So
yeah, so I was about to say, it's like, it sounds like this guy who's been doing this job for 30 years has a pretty good handle.
He's thought about this before, yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say there were 3? Was that a second or 3?
The third one was, you know what? I'll leave that as a main 2.
But those 2, I mean, either way, he knows what he's doing, and so yeah, they're pretty much going to be the biggest company in the world, very likely again. Apple and them are battling it out. By this point, it doesn't really matter who's number 1, 2, 3. Like they're all killing it, but I do think that first one specifically is a really interesting frame. It's just, and I guess the question is, obviously there's the intrinsic value of what they're actually doing versus valuation that is perceived in the market, forward-looking revenue, etc. That you're obviously not being valued just on today. You're being valued on the promise of tomorrow in his case as well.
I'll give you one more thing that he said that he dropped, which is hysterical. I think it was Q1 of last year. They had estimated that for 2023, Nvidia would do 30 billion, end up doing like 65 or something. And he just said that was like, he's like, I couldn't believe how far off our estimates were. And then again, just to hype himself up, he's like, so what I'm telling you now, you should double it.
There we go.
Unreal though.
Oh, I think we can wrap it. Go on.
Sorry, I'll pin last thing from the podcast. We'll bring it back to the beginning with Elon here, because he talks about Elon specifically and XAI. And the very last thing, and we'll leave it with this, is from the podcast. He said that XAI was able to put up a data center, 100,000 H100s. That's the main chip unit from Nvidia. He's like, typically it takes 2 to 4 years. He said XAI, Elon and his team did it in 19 days. And then he just goes, Elon's an N of 1 for understanding large systems, putting these type of things together, marshaling resources. And I just want to end with that because, there's the perspective that we all obviously get, the knee-jerk perspective on X when he puts something you disagree with, or you read the mainstream media about him. But then now you're talking about the most consequential CEO in the world being like, this guy is an N of 1. So like, that's the other way to think about it, right? Is like, it's easy. These are the people that I trust their perspective on, and a little bit of talking book, right? He's just like,
what is the theme of NIA? Everyone's talking their book, except for us because we're not selling anything. There you go. That's why you're here.
Let's shut it
appreciate
down.
You guys.
Quick ending.
Hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you guys next week for the AMA. Make sure you tune in for that, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Peace.